Ion stood at the edge of the old pedestrian bridge, his breath visible in the cold night air as the city lights flickered below. He had lived his whole life believing kindness was something borrowed, beautiful, but never his to keep. Life had chipped away at him little by little, losing his mother early, watching his father work himself into exhaustion, and later struggling alone after both were gone. But despite everything, Ion carried a strange softness in him, a tenderness he never quite understood. Every evening after work at a small repair shop, he'd pass the bridge and leave a small packet of food for anyone who needed it. He never stayed to see who took it. He never waited for gratitude. Tonight, though, fate had someone waiting. A shivering girl, clothes thin, eyes filled with the kind of sadness that held stories she'd never say aloud, watched him place the packet and step away quietly. She whispered, "Why do you do this?" Ion froze, surprised someone had finally asked the question nobody cared to know. He turned, offering a small smile. "Because I know what it's like to need kindness, and not find any." The girl lowered her head, something breaking inside her, something fragile that hadn't been touched by warmth in a long time. Her name was Mare, though she didn't say it yet. She swallowed hard as she opened the food packet, her hands trembling not from cold but from the overwhelming confusion of experiencing gentleness after so long. Ion nodded as if assuring her she didn't need to explain anything. He walked away slowly, but she watched him as though he carried a piece of light she didn't want to lose. Later that night, as she sat near the bridge railing eating the warm food, she remembered days when she once believed the world was kind, before her stepfather threw her out, before the nights on the street, before she stopped expecting rescue. Now, a stranger's kindness made the world confusing again. She whispered into the wind, "Don't be kind if you won't stay." But Ion walked home heavy-hearted, fighting an old ache he thought he buried. He wished he could do more, but he could barely support himself. Still, something about the girl's eyes, the raw hurt, the loneliness, etched itself into him like a quiet cry asking to be heard. The next evening, Ion came again, food in hand, wondering if she would be there. Mare was sitting in the same spot, hugging herself, the city's cold pressing into her bones. She looked up when she heard his footsteps. This time she didn't act shy or distant. Instead, she whispered, "I waited." Ion's chest tightened. He handed her the food, sitting beside her on the cold concrete. "You don't have to wait for me," he said gently. "But I'll come anyway." She watched him with eyes that had seen too much darkness to trust easily, yet something in his voice, soft but steady, felt like a promise she wanted to believe. They talked for the first time, not about pain, not about their lives, but about little things, the taste of tea, the noise of city traffic, how stars look different from the countryside. For a moment, their brokenness felt less heavy, as if two shattered pieces had found the comfort of matching edges. Days turned into weeks, and their silent company became a ritual. Ion would finish work, buy 2 cups of hot tea, and meet Mare on the bridge. She would smile shyly now, as if the world had started thawing around her. But Ion noticed her health worsening, the deepening shadows under her eyes, her coughing in the cold, the way she tried to hide her shaking hands. One evening, he couldn't take it anymore. "Mare, you can't live out here," he said softly. She stiffened. "I don't have a choice," she murmured. "And I don't want to be someone's burden." Ion shook his head. "You're not. You never will be." But she wasn't convinced. "People say that before they leave," she whispered. The words stabbed him. He could feel the weight of her scarred trust. He promised her that he wouldn't disappear, and in his heart, he meant it with everything he had. He just didn't know their story was about to collide with a destiny neither of them expected. The universe has a strange way of rewarding silent, unseen kindness. The small repair shop where Ion worked was owned by an elderly man, Mr. Sadiq, who visited rarely since he'd fallen ill. One night, the old man arrived unexpectedly, watching Ion patiently repair things others would throw away, same way he treated people. Mr. Sadiq asked about Ion's life, and for the first time, Ion spoke about Mare, about her struggles, about how he wished he could help her properly. The old man listened without a word, then handed Ion an envelope. "I've been watching you for years," he said. "Your honesty, your kindness, you remind me of the son I lost. I have no family left, and I want you to have something." Inside were keys, not just to the shop, but to everything the man owned. Ion was stunned. I can't accept this." The old man smiled faintly. "Kind souls like you are rare. And everything I built, I want it to go to someone who knows the value of compassion." Ion didn't realize yet that Mr. Sadiq was not just a shop owner. He was a billionaire, quiet, hidden, humble. The next morning, the news broke everywhere. A reclusive billionaire had passed away, leaving his entire fortune to his young employee. Reporters swarmed the street, cameras flashing, microphones raised. Ion felt overwhelmed, terrified even. He hadn't wanted money, he'd only wanted to help someone survive the night. That evening, he ran straight to the bridge, breathing hard, searching desperately for Mare, wanting to tell her everything, wanting someone to look at him the same way she always had, without expectations. She wasn't there. Panic surged in him like a wave. He searched the streets, calling her name. Hours passed before he found her curled up behind a closed bakery, too weak to stand, eyes barely open. He lifted her into his arms, heart pounding, whispering, "Stay with me, please." At the hospital, doctors worked quickly. Ion sat outside the emergency room, hands shaking, praying to a god he hadn't spoken to in years. When the doctor finally came out, the news hit him like a blow: severe malnutrition, dehydration, respiratory infection. But she would live. Ion breathed for the first time in hours. When Mare woke, her voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want you to waste your time on someone broken." Tears filled Ion's eyes. "You're not broken," he said. "You're someone who deserved love long before I met you." She blinked rapidly, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "Why do you care so much?" Ion took her hand gently. "Because you were kind to me in a way no one else has been, you trusted me." Days turned into weeks of recovery. Ion used part of his newfound wealth to secure a warm, safe apartment for Mare, though he never told her about the billions. Not yet. He didn't want her to think anything between them was because of money. He visited her daily, bringing books, meals, small gifts that made her eyes light up. Slowly, the girl who once lived in silence began smiling freely, laughing sometimes, even teasing Ion gently when he worried too much. But she also struggled with internal battles, nightmares, memories of her stepfather's cruelty, the fear of losing the first person who ever chose her. Sometimes, she'd wake up crying. Ion would sit beside her until she calmed, whispering, "You're safe. You're home." She didn't believe in miracles, but she believed in him. One evening, as rain pattered softly on the windows, Mare stood by the glass, watching droplets race each other downward. Ion entered quietly with 2 steaming cups of tea. She turned, her eyes carrying something heavier than the weather. "Ion, what do you want from me?" she asked softly. "You've done so much. It feels unfair." Ion placed the tea on the table and walked toward her slowly. "I want nothing from you," he said. "Kindness isn't a trade." She shook her head. "People don't help without wanting something eventually." Ion held her gaze. "Then let me be the first." She stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, "I'm scared." He stepped closer. "So am I." It was the first time she saw vulnerability in him, the same vulnerability she carried. Something shifted between them like a fragile truth finally spoken aloud. Weeks later, when Mare fully recovered, Ion took her to a quiet park where yellow lanterns hung between the trees. She walked slowly, breathing in the calm she'd never known. Ion stopped under a lantern and finally told her the truth, about Mr. Sadiq, the inheritance, the immense wealth he now possessed. Mare froze. "So you're a billionaire?" Her heart dropped. "Ion, people like you don't belong with people like me." She turned away, tears blurring her vision. Ion quickly reached for her hand. "Stop." She shook her head. "You didn't need me. I was just someone you pitied." His grip tightened gently. "You were the first person I chose. Before money, before anything. Mare, I loved you when I had nothing." Her breath hitched. He pulled her close and rested her head against his chest. "And I still love you now." She cried into him, not softly but painfully, years of abandonment, fear, and loneliness pouring out. Ion held her like she was something precious, something irreplaceable. When she finally lifted her face, she whispered, "Why me?" His thumb brushed her cheek tenderly. "Because you saw me," he said. "Not what I had, not what I didn't, just me." She looked into his eyes and saw no lies, no pity, only love. The kind she had dreamed of but never believed she deserved. He gently cupped her face. "Let me give you the life you always deserved." She swallowed, shaky but hopeful. "And if I fall again?" Ion smiled softly. "Then I'll fall with you." Months passed, and Mare slowly stepped into a new world. Ion encouraged her to study again, to rebuild her life with dignity and purpose. She enrolled in a design course, her creativity blooming like spring after a lifetime of winter. Ion would drive her to classes, proud but quiet, never making her feel indebted. Slowly, Mare gained confidence, friends, dreams. She learned to laugh again, loud, genuine, unguarded. And Ion watched her glow, every day more convinced that love was the greatest wealth he'd ever received. Sometimes, late at night, Mare would sit beside him, resting her head on his shoulder, whispering, "Thank you for choosing me." And every time, he kissed her forehead softly. Always. But life rarely moves without testing love. One day, Mare's stepfather resurfaced, demanding money, threatening to reveal her past publicly. She shook as she held the message, terrified. Ion stood behind her, reading it silently before gently taking the phone from her trembling hands. "He won't hurt you again," he said calmly. She looked up in fear. "Ion, what if he ruins everything?" Ion touched her cheek softly. "He can't ruin what you've rebuilt." The next morning, Ion met the man, not with anger, but with quiet strength. "You don't get to haunt her anymore," Ion said firmly. "You don't get her fear. Or her tears. Not ever again." The stepfather tried threats, insults, manipulation, but Ion ended it legally, firmly, permanently. When he returned home, Mare burst into tears of relief, collapsing into his arms. They held each other for a long time, both shaking, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that love had finally won. Mare cupped his face with trembling hands. "Why do you fight so hard for me?" He kissed her palm softly. "Because you're the first person who taught me what love feels like." She inhaled sharply, overwhelmed. "I don't know if I deserve you." Ion shook his head, whispering, "We deserve each other." And in that quiet living room, wrapped in innocence and hope, Mare finally allowed herself to believe she was worthy, not because someone saved her, but because she survived long enough to be found by someone who loved her gently. Years later, Mare stood on a stage, graduating with honors. Ion watched from the front row, tears blurring his vision as she held her certificate with pride. After the ceremony, she ran to him, throwing her arms around him, laughing breathlessly. "We made it," she whispered. Ion held her close, feeling the universe settle into place. "You made it," he corrected softly. She pulled back, eyes shining. "No, we did." Then, in the golden evening light, she took his hands and whispered the words he had waited years to hear, words built from pain, healing, and rebirth. "Ion, you weren't just my kindness. You were my home." And for the first time in their long, fragile, miraculous journey, Ion felt complete, not because of money, not because of destiny, but because two broken souls had found wholeness in each other.